China launches into a second day of live-fire exercises around Taiwan, despite strong reactions from around the world. A sense of unease grows in Taipei as multiple Chinese missiles land in waters around the country. Planes flying into and out of Taiwan are now having to fly around the danger zones of China's military drills. And US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says her Asia trip was never about changing the status quo. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. China has continued its military exercises surrounding Taiwan, with Taipei confirming that Chinese military planes and ships crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait on Friday morning. Beijing announced the exercises surrounding Taiwan after US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taipei for a whirlwind visit. Beijing has already fired missiles, some targeting Taiwan's territorial waters. The exercises have been extended into Monday morning, Bing Wang reports.
Chinese missiles fired into the waters surrounding Taiwan. White smoke can be seen as rockets fly into the sky. Beijing is launching a show of force over U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's stop in Taiwan. Pelosi is the highest-ranking sitting American official to visit the country in 25 years. China views Taiwan as part of its own territory, although the Communist Party has never ruled the country. Taiwan is a democratic nation with its own government, and Beijing views Pelosi's visit as American support for Taipei. The day after Pelosi's visit, China launched its military exercises around the island. On Thursday, Taiwan's defense ministry confirmed Beijing fired 11 ballistic missiles into waters north, east, and south of the island. And another 22 Chinese fighter jets crossed the median line, a buffer in the Taiwan Strait separating the two countries. Taiwan's foreign ministry says it's a major provocation.
我国政府我们会更坚定地来捍卫我国的国家主权以及领土的完整。对于当前的情势，我国的政府我们除了会积极地来强化自我的防卫的能力，我们同时也会跟美国等理念相近的国家来保持密切的联系跟协调。
Taiwan's Ministry of Defense also confirmed that it tracked 4 missiles which flew above the main island. They landed in waters considered Japan's exclusive economic zone. Japan's defense ministry says it's the first time Chinese missiles have fallen into its EEZ.
我が国の安全保障及び国民の安全に関わる重大な問題であるとあります。 強く非難いたします。また、中国に対して外交ルートを通じ抗議をいたしました。
The international community also condemned China's actions, including the G7, the EU, and the United States. The White House says they will closely monitor the situation.
We will conduct standard air and maritime transits through the Taiwan Strait in the next few weeks, consistent, again, with our long-standing approach to defending freedom of the seas and international law. And we will take further steps to demonstrate our commitment to the security of our allies in the region.
Pelosi is now in Japan, the final stop on her Asia tour. But her visit to Taiwan has proved the issues between Taipei and Beijing have consequences beyond this region. Bill Kong, Chris Ma, and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
For some analysis of China's military drills, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Taipei-based defense expert Eric Shi.
We're hearing from Japan and Taiwan's Ministry of Defense that China conducted missile strikes near Japan's exclusive economic zone, estimating that one of those missiles could have flown over Taiwan. Can you talk about the significance about that?
China want to show them they have the capability to blockade the Taiwan area. When they launch the missile and fly past the Taiwan island and hitting their target in east and the southwest and the eastern Taiwan, because the three target area have their different meanings. That is important because in the Taiwan Strait crisis comes out again. The only possibility to help Taiwan is the United States. But the United States want to launch their military forces to help or enhance Taiwan's defense capability. It means American armed forces will come from the east.
Taiwan's Ministry of Defense has called out these Chinese military drills because they're attempting to blockade Taiwan. What can you tell us about how these drills are being structured?
From their missile blockade, and I think not only missile blockade, they also shows they use the long-range artillery rocket to blockade the Taiwan Strait, and they also can show their long-range. I think probably in the next few days they will launch the long-range cruise missiles to hitting the target or target area in their announcement during the southern or southwest Taiwan. Maybe I could say this shows the after the modernization of the PLA armed forces, right now they shows they have a capability to blockade Taiwan.
Taiwan's military has said that in response to these drills, that they would raise their combat readiness and their alert level. But what exactly does that mean, and how has Taiwan's military responded so far?
Okay, I think because this time we don't want the close trade relationship come into the real combat action. Yes, the PLA choose their military drills area is very close to Taiwan, but we raise our alarm and make our armed forces, especially Air Force and the Navy, to alarm to PLA's drill. But we try our best not to to do more than our ordinary event, our own ordinary mission scale. I think the armed forces want to show their status like we are not seeking the combat, we are not seeking the conflict, but we have capability to defend Taiwan.
Taiwan has condemned China's launch of multiple missiles into waters around the country. It says China's actions are threatening Taiwan's national security, escalating tensions and affecting regular international traffic and trade. It also accused Beijing of imitating North Korea in test firing missiles into waters near other countries. As Louise Watt reports.
Taiwan on high alert. Its air force taking to the skies as Chinese forces kicked off unprecedented military drills around the island. China said they involved more than 100 planes, including fighter jets and bombers, and more than 10 warships. It also fired multiple missiles into waters off Taiwan. The Foreign Ministry accused Beijing of following the example of North Korea in test firing missiles into waters near other countries, and said it was undermining regional peace.
我要强调，我们不会升高冲突，不会挑起争端，但我们会坚定地捍卫主权和国家安全，坚守民主自由的防线。
Japan said that 4 ballistic missiles likely passed over Taiwan, but Taiwan's defense ministry said they flew high into the atmosphere and constituted no threat to the country.
我觉得最重要的是，中共他要打击的是这个台湾的这个心理民心士气。
China's actions sparked outrage and a pledge to donate millions of US dollars by Robert Tsao, the founder of one of Taiwan's and the world's biggest chip makers.
所以今天我宣布了，将捐出30亿新台币，大约1亿美元，来协助加强国防。
On the streets of Taipei, it was business as usual, but there was a sense of uneasiness.
也是会有一些心理上的压力啦，就是说，其实两边这个没有对话已经很久了。那中国这边的军事的行动其实都一直有持续啦。 所以我们也会担心有擦枪走火的一个状况。
这一次我个人觉得比较紧张啦，因为毕竟他们的那个围台的那个军演的范围太近了，又太多了，对，会比较紧张。
Indicative of the mood in the capital, the top downloaded app is one which gives the nearest location of air raid bunkers. The self-governing democracy has lived with the spectre of a Chinese invasion for decades, and the capital alone has more than 4,000 air raid shelters. China's military exercises are in response to a whirlwind visit by Nancy Pelosi, the US House Speaker. On Tuesday, she became the highest-level American official to visit Taipei in 25 years. A trip Beijing sees as a challenge to its claims over Taiwan's sovereignty.
Pelosi is now in Japan, and America's diplomatic push in the region continues. But for now, at least, it's Taiwan left to deal with the ongoing fallout. Klein Wong and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
The US House Speaker is now in Japan, where she commented on the developments that followed her visit to Taiwan after meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Pelosi said the US would not let China isolate Taiwan. Speaking at the US Embassy in Tokyo on the last leg of her Asia trip, she also said the US should not let commercial interests get in the way of speaking out on China's human rights issues, saying the country's treatment of its minority Muslim Uyghur population had been labelled a genocide. She emphasised that her trip to Asia was about maintaining the status quo.
You may be more interested in, again, what the Chinese did while we were traveling, and we have said from the start that our representation here is not about changing the status quo here in Asia, changing the status quo in Taiwan. It's about, again, the Taiwan Relations Act, the U.S.-China policy, all of the pieces of legislation and agreements that have established what our relationship is, to have peace in the Taiwan Straits and to have the status quo prevail.
China's live-fire drills have drawn strong words from the US Secretary of State and his Southeast Asian counterparts. Speaking at a summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, Antony Blinken said that cooling tensions in the Taiwan Strait is in everyone's best interest.
The United States continues to have an abiding interest in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. We oppose any unilateral efforts to change the status quo, especially by force. We in countries around the world believe that escalation serves no one and could have unintended consequences that serve no one's interests, including ASEAN members and including China.
ASEAN delegates echoed his comments, calling for restraint and warning that miscalculations could lead to, quote, serious confrontation. In a statement, the bloc said it stands ready to facilitate peaceful dialogue. The impact of China's military exercises has also been felt in the business world. Taiwan's main stock market recovered over 2% on Friday after investors were initially spooked by the start of the drills. The Taiwan Stock Exchange, or TAIEX, lost 1.5% on Thursday before authorities intervened to stabilize prices. It ended trading down just 0.5%. Taiwan's biggest company, semiconductor manufacturer TSMC, saw its share price tumble about $16.5 before recovering by the end of trading. The visit by US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan prompted China to place import bans on some Taiwanese products. It's led the country's 9 big industrial and commercial business associations to jointly urge both sides of the Taiwan Strait to avert conflict. China is Taiwan's biggest export market and largest source of trade. The sanctions have impacted small businesses here, particularly those that export fruit. One company says it has lost over $166,000 from the recent bans.
我们原本寄望还有像柑橘类这些品项来继续支撑下去，我们真的不知道 后面还有什么东西能够做。
Passengers flying in and out of Taiwan are facing delays or longer journeys as China imposed no-fly zones over the sites of its military drills around the country. The disruption has already affected nearly 100 flights. Yu Jinghuang reports.
At Taiwan's largest international airport, a frustrating wait. Dozens of flights cancelled in the wake of China's live fire drills around Taiwan.
直线的地方都是有经过到这个蓝色的危险区域哈，所以基本上可以这么说啦，我们台湾最赖以为生的几个航路几乎都已经被挡住了，都被封锁到。
According to Taiwan's civil aviation body, 74 flights were affected by the military exercises, which started on Thursday. Some planes had to take longer routes, namely those flying to North America and Northeast Asia and passing through the Fukuoka Flight Information Zone, as well as those flying southward through the Philippine Flight Information Region.
对于航空公司的影响来讲，因为航路的更动，它增加了时间还有燃油费的成本的耗损。那再来就是说，因为更港航道可能会航道做这个因为压缩了，可能部分的航班也要做舍弃。那整个综整的影响的话，是时间成本都要做这个耗损的预期规划。
Aircraft passengers are among those so far in Taiwan to feel the direct impact of China's military drills, but some travelers are concerned about potential future disruption.
关于这一次军演的话，目前受到影响最主要就是班机的 delay， 虽然没办法说到底它会不会打过来，或者是这件事会不会发生，但是它确实是慢慢的在逼近我们的生活，也是 我们应该要认真去思考的问题。
Beijing says these military drills will continue for another 2 days, but the long-term effects of China's aggression, not just on travel, but on Taiwan's economy and its people's daily lives, may take longer to unravel. Sheng Lin and Yu Jinghuang for TaiwanPlus.
Stay with us here on Taiwan Plus. After the break, we travel to a fishing village in southern Taiwan where tourists aren't letting China's military drills disrupt their holiday plans.
I'm Yin Khvat for TaiwanPlus. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. China's live fire drills, which kicked off on Thursday near Taiwan's coast, have brought some fishing ports to a standstill. But as John Van Trieste reports, coastal resorts are still booming, with some tourists even eager to check the drills out.
Donggang is a fishing town on Taiwan's southwest coast. Several miles out to sea sits one of China's live fire zones. Ballistic missiles are thought to have landed there, according to the Defense Ministry. The missile fire is part of Beijing's angry response to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's recent trip to Taipei. Since live fire drills started on Thursday, fishing boats have been stuck in harbor.
But
while fishing has stopped, the town is still abuzz with activity. This town is the gateway to Xiaoliuqiu, an island just offshore that's a popular summer getaway. The ferry is still running, and long lines of tourists wait to get on board. Far from being scared off, some say they want to catch a glimpse of the action. And tourists already on the island say they have no plans to head home early. Souvenir stands and other tourist shops remain open. And so, for all but those who make their living from the sea, life on Taiwan's southern coast is going on as usual. John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Officials in Thailand say at least 13 people are dead and dozens more injured after a fire at a nightclub. The blaze occurred in Chonburi province to the southeast of the capital Bangkok. So far, the victims have all been identified as Thai nationals, and the cause of the fire is still under investigation. Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-ocha says victims' families will receive government aid and that entertainment venues nationwide will be inspected for safety. 2 people have been executed in Singapore for drug offences, according to a journalist in close contact with one of the prisoners' families. As the number of executions carried out hits double digits for the first time in years, the city-state is facing increasing international criticism. In April, authorities executed a mentally disabled Malaysian man for entering Singapore with about 3 tablespoons of heroin. The case elicited pleas for clemency from the United Nations, the European Union and celebrities around the world. The UN Human Rights Council this week urged Singapore to immediately halt all scheduled executions, of which there are currently 4. All the prisoners killed this year, the most since 2008, have been convicted of drug offences. For more on capital punishment in Singapore, our reporter Reinhold Kilpatrick spoke with Singaporean journalist and activist Kirsten Ham.
Why is Singapore executing this number of people, and historically, how unusual is it?
I've been hearing from the families who have been hearing it from their loved ones on death row is that there is a sense that death row is, as they say, too full. So what they're telling their families is that the authorities are keen to move forward with the executions because they need the cells and they expect that there will be more people who will be sentenced to death in the near future. So they were trying to clear this backlog.
The United Nations Human Rights Committee this week condemned Singapore for the executions, calling them deplorable. How have the local authorities responded to this international criticism?
The government's view will be that, oh, this is what we decide for Singapore. We have the right to decide our own policy. And anyway, this policy works. And they claim that it does deter the drug trade and keep Singapore safe. And they get away with this argument because locally there's so much propaganda about the war on drugs and how it's necessary. And UN comment does not get space in Singapore. So, for instance, I've not seen it reported in the local media at all.
As you said, this is part of a bigger war on drugs in Singapore. But how effective have the executions been in deterring drug abuse or drug-related offenses?
There's no evidence that we know of, and certainly around the world, a lot of research has also pointed out that there's no evidence that the death penalty is effective against drugs in deterring drugs and the drug trade. It's very unclear how they're supposed to do that when the government is also so opaque. We only know that executions are about to happen because families get the execution notice and then they tell us, and then we make it public with the family's consent. If not, the government doesn't announce that an execution is happening, the local media doesn't report on it, and it's only when they are pressed by media queries that they might issue a statement to confirm an execution.
You've been working closely with the families of death row inmates and closely following court proceedings. What is it like for the people involved in this process?
This year in particular, when the executions are happening so fast, it's really traumatic for the families because one execution notice doesn't just affect one prisoner and one family, it affects all of them. When they see someone get an execution notice, it makes them worry for their own loved ones. Or if they are a family whose loved one has already been hanged, it just brings that painful memory back. The families are really struggling at this time. They're very anxious and fearful. But the prisoners inside are in their solitary cells dealing with this and seeing, people that they've known for a long time, people in the cell next to them get taken away and never coming back, and they have to deal with that themselves.
US basketball star Brittany Griner has been sentenced to 9 years behind bars in Russia. She was convicted of bringing a cannabis vape cartridge into the country in February. Griner was also fined $16,000. She called it an honest mistake and pled guilty. Her lawyer says they will appeal the verdict. Griner's arrest and conviction come amid heightened tensions between the United States and Russia over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. There is speculation that Griner could be involved in a prisoner swap between the two countries. The US government has offered Russia an unspecified deal.
I know everybody is making some assumptions here about what that proposal is. I won't go into detail about it. But it's a serious proposal. We urge them to accept it. They should have accepted it weeks ago when we first made it.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally, we leave you with images which are of 2/3 of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, showing the largest amount of coral cover in 36 years. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.